My name is Bas Vandenberg, and today's session will be led by me and Thierry Marchandise, who is also on the session.
Hello, everyone.
In the first session, a couple of weeks ago, we focused on what's happening in the market. We did that together with IDC. If you missed that session, it's accessible on demand as well, so you can check it out on our website. I believe at the end, we'll share some resources where you can find it as well. Today's session is a little bit more pragmatic and consists of two parts. We're going to start with a short introduction of the subject and then followed by a somewhat longer demo where we cover a number of aspects around agentic AI. If you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to ask them through the chat option that we have. We may be able to answer them at the end. I'm not quite sure of that. If not, we'll be following out of band up with you. So what you see on the screen currently, right, this comic, I cannot take any credit for, but it isn't just meant to be funny, right? But it highlights the current paradox that we're in. There's a lot of pressure and executive demand driving investment into autonomous AI. And yet at the same time, we often lack a tangible set of defined outcomes, as well as the governed framework that is needed for the successful execution of it. And that's what I try to visualize here in the slide as well, that is shown on the screen. The promise of agentic AI is obviously autonomous flow execution, where agents are handling complex business processes from procurement to customer service, and ideally with minimal human intervention. And to anyone, that sounds obviously very compelling, right? There's a cost aspect to it. There's kind of an advanced subject to it. But the reality today is that most organizations are stuck in kind of an early adopter stage. The initiatives that are being laid out are often fragmented. They are stuck in a sandbox environment, and often they fail to reach production because they hit various walls, whether that is practical integration limits, security limits, essentially limits within frameworks that exist in organization. And it is therefore inevitable, right, that we either need to drive harder on the outcomes so that the expectations, right, are going to meet those outcomes, or we need to lower our expectations. Now, obviously here, right, we are going to assume that we're going to do the first, right? And if we want to get these two items closer together, the outcomes to the expectations, there are three key areas that we see that we need to scale up our attention. And you could summarize them as the need for an enterprise-grade control plane. And these three key areas are around security, right? And security is a pretty broad area, but it's very obvious through, for example, a risk that an agent is operating without a clear identity or without proper role-based access control and can perform unauthorized actions. There's obviously the question around governance. Who is monitoring what is happening, right? Keeping it in check. What do we have out there? Who's using it? What is the cost of it, right? What's the token usage? What is the cost of operation? Are we compliant in line with our compliance statement? And then last but not least, the orchestration is an often forgotten item as well. In principle, right, an MCP tool or an agent is conceptually simple, right? It represents a function, but actual enterprise process behind it is often very complex, right? It may involve a file transfer, a Kafka event, and a set of API updates. It can span multiple clouds and legacy protocols, right? And if the agents fail mid-step, you need to have a proper middleware layer around it to handle the rollback, the recovery, the state management, and point-to-point connections and integrations are brittle and they're going to collapse under the weight of that complexity. And simply, you cannot manage this skill, right, or close this reality gap with custom code or narrow integrations. You really need that enterprise level control layer. Oops. So let's visualize this a bit, right? Agentic AI, right, sits on top of your existing landscape, and we kind of visualize that here, that existing landscape in that gray section at the bottom. In the API world, XP has been leading to get this, what we refer to as sprawl, under control, right? But now agentic AI is introducing an additional layer that is visualized here on top of it. And in a perfect world, these new assets are sitting and accessing the organization through a set of managed APIs. But the reality is a lot more complex, as we've seen with our customers, and often problematic too. We see agents and tools pop up in every place in the organization. Some are managed, some are introduced by third-party vendors, and then the result of various creative internal engineering departments. And as we saw on the previous slide, right, MCP is not equal to API, but it is true that a solid agentic AI approach relies on a mature API approach. Right? In its simplest form, an MCP server or an MCP tool is connected to a single API with a number of connected methods. And that is what you see what a lot of gateway vendors offers, right? They have this MCP-ification option to transform an API in a few clicks. And of course, right, we can do that as well. But that is not what will get you the outcomes that you're looking for, right? Often the reality, as we saw on the previous slide, is a little bit more hairy, and you need to do that backend integration. And it is not just the equivalent of an existing API in your organization. So to provide an effective interface, right, it will have to be wired into a more complex backend landscape. And similarly to what we saw happening with APIs years ago, right, as MCP is gaining momentum and internal teams define their own specialized MCP servers, each offering a set of curated capabilities, we see the emergence of a new layer of sprawl. And without a unified discovery layer or a registry, agents struggle to find the right tool when they need it. And essentially, the IT leadership loses the ability to govern, secure, and monitor who is building what, who's using what, where, and why. And this new chaos that arises from that threatens to derail the promise of this autonomous execution, just as the technology is maturing. And as mentioned in the previous slide, right, there are three main concerns around it. Security is one of them, and that's a broad spectrum. In a perfect world, and all these MCPs are created in one place, but as we already see, that's not the case. Second, right, ideally, this all runs at least in a somewhat managed, on top of a set of managed APIs, but that is often not a reality either. There's going to be unmanaged APIs and other digital assets involved that it is connected to. And similar to your APIs, you want a solution that allows you to govern this all in one place at scale, allowing you to secure, to proxy, and to surface it all up in one registry and one catalog. Governance is an important aspect too, right? How many things do you have? How many servers? How many tools? How many APIs do you have? Who's using them? Is that legitimate use? Do we have insight? Very basic questions with a lot of layers that are often not easy to answer. And last, as mentioned, the orchestration aspect. As we saw on the previous slide, in a very simple form, an MCP could be just a wrapped API server. But the reality is that is not the reality in most situations, where it's going to be wired to more complexity. And so with that, right, the maturity of APIs is more important than ever. And the speed of your innovation is directly tied to the maturity of your API infrastructure. We're seeing in many organizations that are more mature, more successful in some of these journeys, is that there is an intense focus on data accessibility and quality, because AI depends on clean and well-governed data. Security and governance have escalated beyond the traditional concerns, right? Because now there are more sophisticated prompt injection attacks, model poisoning, and all these other things that actually can play into this and underline the importance of basically having that underlying API order well under control. With the explosion of microservices and SaaS, integration and scalability are even more paramount now to connect to diverse IAM models and external services. And the market tells us, right, that organizations that are lagging in their API maturity are not just risking all the items that are listed here, but they also see a slower time to market for their AI products and services, making this a very critical investment area. So how do we scale this, right? And how do we get it under control? I'll use the previously used diagram in a little bit of a sort of dynamic manner where we go from the bottom up. So it starts at the bottom First, we'll bring order in the chaos of access through a set of control and managed APIs. If you want to keep any of the managed APIs in another managed environment, that is absolutely fine. So ultimately, you end up with something on the screen that looks like this. You have your managed APIs in an existing solution, or you have them managed through Fusion. Then the result is a clear set of managed APIs, right? All with clear security and access control. Then the next layer, right, is that API foundation can now act as the foundation for your agentic AI layer. Here on the screen, you see the build out of the agents and the MCP services. And then what happens is that these artifacts can all be registered manually or discovered automatically through our agents in Engage, whether they are artifacts that are hosted in Fusion or in a non-X-ray environment. And from there, the user then has the option to decide which ones they officially want to expose and publish in that registry that then can be used officially as the entry point for the organization. Layering it like this gives you the ability to securely open up your backend, have the orchestration capabilities to give you the necessary reliability and scale, and provide the right level of central governance without being overbearing on your organization. So we're going to see a part of this as part of a set of demos in the next 15 minutes. During this demo, we'll be using both Amplify Fusion and Engage, as well as Claude Desktop. This allows us to show you how that integration of MCP tools in a very visual way, right? Obviously, right, in your target application as you're building it, this will be more polished and hidden, but the way we're kind of showing it today will help to better visualize the steps for the purpose of the demo. So Thierry Marchandise, please walk us through your demo scenarios.
Thank you, Wes. Oops.
Sorry.
So yes, indeed. Yeah. Okay, thanks. So yes, indeed, I will demonstrate the three main features you just introduced with Amplify platform. So first, I will show you how to implement an MCP server with Amplify Fusion to expose an existing backend application that has no MCP interface. So we'll create it in the first part of the demo. In the second part, I will show you how to proxy an existing MCP server with Fusion to add the same layer of security than the first one. And in the third part of the demo, I will show you how to automatically discover these two MCP servers in Engage and engage with the users so they can subscribe and use this MCP server for their business. So let me start the demo. Here's an example of a business application that a company can use to manage their invoices. So basically, invoice have invoice number, customer names, invoice status, and due dates, and of course, value. This example is Zoho. Zoho is a third-party tool, and it has an API to manage the invoice, but we don't have an MCP server. So what if now I want my AI agent to be able to manage all this API, all these invoices, to do this action that I can do on the UI or via the API. So for that, I can use Amplify Fusion to design this MCP. So here's a designer for Fusion, where you can handle all type of integration, including our AI gateway features to implement an MCP server. So here I've already started to create an MCP server. I have already connected with two functions, search invoices and send invoice. Let's have a look in detail how we create this. So you create an MCP server, you give it a name, a front-end base path that will be used by the AI agent to call the MCP server. You give a description that is also necessary for the AI agent to really understand what is the purpose of your MCP server. You can secure the MCP server Here I choose API key with an API key located in the header of the request. That's for the global configuration, and you can add tools for your MCP server. So as I said, I already added 2 of them, and I'm going to add a third one, for instance, to apply discount. And then you add a description of the tool that is very important for the MCP client, the AI agent, to understand what is this tool about. You can add also business rules, so it's used for the right purpose. And then you have to provide an input schema. Input schema is how this will be, your prompt will be converted to a schema, a JSON schema, typically, so it is understood by the MCP server. So here we have an example that has nothing to do with our use case, but for instance, I will be able to provide as an object property of the request the discount. It will be a string because it can be 10%, for instance. So the discount is a required field, of course. We will add another field, which is the invoice ID, which is a string. We don't necessarily need an example for that. And this is also a required string, a required properties. So now we have our new tool. So we are able to link it to an integration. I have not done it yet, so I will create a new integration. Apply discount on invoice. So it's applying a discount on a Zoho invoice. So I can also here give some detail for my documentation. And I create this integration now. So here I'm going to implement this tool, apply discount, or it is going to be used. So here we can use any of our integration tools. So we have, for instance, Amazon connectors, Kafka connectors, a lot of Google and Microsoft connectors, Salesforce, and so on. So you can use our out-of-the-box connector or our more technical connector. You have OpenAPI. So we are going to call the API of Zoho because we don't have a Zoho connector, but we can still connect to it and expose it as an MCP server. So here I have to select my API that I have already imported. I have the Zoho invoice API file imported, and with all the credentials I have connected and I can test my backend connection is working fine. So I will select what API action I want to do. I want to update. This is one of the operations provided by the Zoho API. So to update an invoice, I need to provide invoice ID. And in our input body, we provided invoice ID as an input parameter. What I want to update is in the body, I just want to update the discount. So with this, I'm going to use my 2 input parameter in the request to update an invoice, and I will get a result. This is the API code, and I have a response here that is with a code, a message, and an invoice, the updated invoice. So I want to decide my type of response. For the MCP server support this type of response, I can provide this JSON response as a text and let my AI agent understand the response format. And I said it's text, so I will provide the text, the response in the output text. And that's it. I'm done. I have done. It will go in the text format. I can also enter errors and so on. So that's done. I have now 3 tools, and I'm going to activate my MCP server so I can use it. So now my MCP server is active on this URL that my MCP client, the AI agent, can use. So for this, I'm using Cloud Desktop, where I have already configured Invoice Fusion MCP server as a connector. So in Manage Connector, you can see I use this URL already. So coming back to here, I have used the previous version of this MCP with 2 tools already. Now if I reload, I should see 3 tools. So now I can apply discount. So now I'm going to ask, do we have any invoice not sent yet? So it is using my MCP server here and is saying, yes, we have a draft, only one draft, which is the one for Evet LLC. And it's asking whether we want to send invoice or apply a discount, as the AI agent has discovered this from the MCP server definition. So let's apply 10% discount and send it. So it's asking, because that's the first time I'm using the apply discount. If that's okay, I will allow always. So it's applying discount, waiting for the response. Great, it has been applied. Now it's using send invoice. And also this one, I've never used it, so I always allow this tool to be used. So it's sending the invoice. Perfect, it has been sent. So if I go back here and refresh my list, I see it is now sent, and I see the discount is 10%. So that's it for the demo of the implementation. Now I can show you more. So if I come back to here, and now I want not to implement an MCP server, but to proxy an external MCP server. So here I can reuse an existing connection to the external MCP server if I have used one previously, or create a new connection to the external MCP server. So that's a demo MCP server that is available on the internet, very useful for tests. Now I just need to give it a name. This is an order proxy MCP server. I can give a description or not. And now, oh, that was quick. Let me show you. Now we have our proxy server. The first thing you need to do is to synchronize with the external MCP server. So this is the MCP client connection that you can configure to add client authentication. Once you're ready, you synchronize, so you retrieve all the detail of this MCP server. So it's an MCP server about order management. So you can find order detail, cancel an order, or check product availability. So when it's done, you come back to the MCP server and all the tools and detail are synchronized. I now need to provide a front end. I will use the same naming convention that I had. So AI gateway, proxy MCP order. Okay, I save. And now we can set the inbound security to API key. My MCP proxy can now be published with the same security level than my other MCP server. I will use this new URL in my MCP client configuration. So we are fully done with the proxification of an MCP server. Now that I have several MCP servers that are available, I can let the users of my company discover them on our marketplace and use the one they want. So for that, I need to use the Engage platform, and to see that if I go in the service registry, I can see my new order proxy MCP server that was created a few seconds ago, that is here, and from there I can create a product. I will leave this name, but I can customize this product, of course, and decide to publish it on the internal IT services marketplace. So let's publish it. And now let's have a look to our marketplace. So this is the internal marketplace of the IT services of the company, where you already have a product that corresponds to the MCP server we implemented in Fusion, together with a couple of API products. So let's have a look. Let's first refresh and see that our new product, our order proxy MCP server, is here. So we have these two products. One I have already subscribed and requested credential from, and the other one I will be able now to subscribe to it. And register one of my applications. So I'm using my AI agent for this, and I will accept to use the other proxy MCP server that I've just created. I review the registration and then apply. Now I can use an existing API key or request a new one. So for that, new key, I will select the resource I want to use. Now I want to use the order proxy MCP server for this key, and I create. Now I have my new key that is pending. I already had a key previously on this application, on my AI agent for the invoice. Now I have this key also for the order, and they both apply. I'll refresh. See, now my new key is active. I can get it from here and copy the key. So now from close, I have to go in my setting. I need to manage connectors. For that, I go in the configuration, and I have already here my Invoice Fusion MCP server. So I will do something very similar, but it will be my order proxy MCP server. I'll take the key, from here. Sorry, not the key, the URL here. So not every agent is configured the same way, but you basically need these two options, these two parameters, the URL and the API key. I save this. I restart Claude to use a new config file. And now I just hope that I can see the second MCP server with the order tools. So I can ask about an order now. Where is order 1, 2, 3? And I allow the request of order. And I have a response from the MCP server, but I have also a prompt saying it's currently in transit. So console that order, I can take action. That's the value of MCP. I can take action on on the data on the business application. So here we use cancel my order. I allow to use these two. It's not cancel. So we have seen first how to implement an MCP server with Invoice Fusion MCP server, how to proxy another MCP server, and finally how to engage with our marketplace with users so they can subscribe to MCP server the same way, the same experience they subscribe to API, and use them in their client applications. Thank you. Over to you, Bess.
Sorry. Thanks, Jerry. I was muted, so apologies for that. That was awesome to see. Thanks for showing that. That wraps up the demo for today. As a side note, we actually have another one in a few weeks from now. That's going to be focused on AI mediation, token management, cost management, prompt guarding, content policies, right? Please make sure you register for that one too. The link is shown on the screen here. I believe there's also a banner coming by that makes it easy to register. But if you don't see that, there is a link at the bottom of the screen, and you can actually find it on our website as well. I believe on the first page, if you scroll to the bottom, you can sign up for next events. That concludes everything for today. Thanks for listening, and we definitely hope to speak to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.